Hey there, in this video I'm going to talk about some very interesting relationship paradigms, relationship astrology paradigms that I've come to after doing relationship astrology readings for 10 to 15 years. There's some real myths and kind of illusions that I'm going to talk about in this video, and I think you'll really get a lot out of it because it goes right to the heart of what astrologers or those who are aspiring to do astrology, what they kind of get stuck on, and also clients or those who are trying to understand themselves and their relationships better by using astrology. And so if you're studying Western astrological methods like synastry, when you lay one chart on top of another, or the Vedic kutas, or anything else, I think you'll get a lot out of this. And I developed an approach about it was about 10 years ago, called 3D relationship astrology. And it actually takes it's a three-pronged approach. The first is to evaluate the individual, which is actually the most important part of any reading, but certainly relationship astrology reading, because we're the center of everything we're doing. So even though people come to astrologers for relationship astrology readings and they want them to look at the partner and say, what's my compatibility with this person, all of that, they put so much focus on the person they forget themselves. And again, this is the most important part. That's the first prong of the 3D relationships. The second is the synastry, which is after you evaluate the individual, and let's say your tendencies in relationships that you bring to everything, regardless of who you're with, you bring that all the time. Then you look at the compatibility with another individual. How does that energy that you bring interact with all the people in your life, including your relationship partners, right? Each specific person. So that's what's called synastry, right? And then we have the Vedic Kuta system, where we evaluate based on the nakshatras. This is a nakshatra-based system. It's nakshatra-based, but it also connects with the rashis as well behind the nakshatras, and of course it's it's sidereal-based. But it's the Vedic nakshatra point system that evaluates planets based on their interactions with each other. So one person's moon and another person's moon, one person's Mercury, another person's Mercury, based on the nakshatras and those sections of sky, and also the rashis and the what's called Tarabala and different things from Vedic astrology. So that's the 3D approach. But what I'm doing actually in an upcoming class that's called Relationships and More is I'm drilling down into the personal evaluation part a lot more. And I'm also covering a lot of things that I haven't really gone into in enough detail in my previous relationship astrology courses. In the previous 3D relationship courses, I actually just showed how to do the readings and how to apply the techniques, and I just kind of went over certain parts of it a little more quickly than I would like, especially as it relates to the personal part of it, and particularly as it relates to things like the lunar nodes and the moon and other things like that. But in this video, I actually wanted to talk about more big picture conceptual issues a little bit. And these are things that I'm going to be talking about in the Relationships and More weekend course. One of the things is, like I just said, generally, like everything else, relationships are an extension of ourself. And people have enormous projections and blind spots in them. So just really understanding this, that when you're talking to someone about their relationships, and you're doing a relationship astrology reading, let's say that there's a client, and these are somewhat advanced astrology courses, mainly for my students, but other advanced astrologers show up, so we start at a very deep level. So when you're interacting with someone, first you have to understand that they are full of blind spots in their relationships. And in fact, the relationships are in many ways where our blind spots get revealed more than any other way, more than in any other area of life. because we have so many projections, and our projections are, of course, the mirror image of our blind spot. So understanding this conceptually, for example, a person who has a very hard, like, we can see, oh, opposites attract. Okay, but what does that really mean? Yes, it means that we project onto someone else. We're looking for the thing in the other person that we naturally don't generate very easily ourselves. Easiest way to look at it is like, through, let's say, men and women. Men tend to generate a certain thing that women don't generate very easily, and vice versa. Women generate beauty, compromise, things that are more delicate and more just naturally, sort of refined and whatnot than men. Men are much more individual, much more their own, driven by their own, desires and opinions. They're kind of sloppy. They can be sloppy. They can be kind of like just charging ahead. Again, these are very stereotypical, but I'm just saying what women look for in men, therefore, are things like drive, power, things that they don't necessarily generate so easily. A strong individuality, because women have more of a desire to feel themselves as an extension of another person and to try to comfort and accommodate. I say women, but it's mainly the feminine does that. So men that are very individual focused and not so concerned about that can be very compelling, and they'll project. Just like the men will project the beauty and the compromise because it's something they inherently lack. So we can look at this in all kinds of ways, right? When we lacked a certain thing, we'll project, oh, maybe this person will have it, right? And so we're full of these blind spots, right? And so when you look at a chart, noticing and understanding that more than in any other way, we project a lot of those blind spots onto other people. And again, of course, in the weekend course, I'm going to break out what those things are. But this whole projection is huge, right? And not just in general. We project. What are we projecting? How are we projecting? How is it showing up in our relationships? What do those blind spots look like? Where are the areas of the chart where you'll see the person will have a lot of blind spots? Where are they located? How do they, because there are specific areas that are much more blind than others. I'll give you a hint, especially like in the 6th, 8th, and 12th house, things like the nodes and whatnot, which, again, these are the things I'm going to really unravel a lot more in the weekend course, is where the individual is mainly coming from, each individual and their blind spots, their confusion, their strength, their power, right? So that's one of the biggest illusions just in general, is that people who try to do relationship astrology readings, they tend to start from a place that is very much about the compatibility between the two people before actually looking at the client and noticing it's not as much about your compatibility as what your projections are and why you're drawn to this person right now. And which leads to this one, which says people get the relationship they need overall and at any given time, based on their personal tendencies and dashas, or moments in time. So again, we're looking at someone at a moment in time. That moment in time is a part of the larger aggregate of the person's karma. So how do we zoom in and zoom out of these things, right? So the zooming out part, has to do with things like looking at the chart in general, right? In general, the chart is, you have these tendencies and blah, blah, but right now you're in Rahu Dasha, so it's this. Right now you're in Venus Dasha. Right now you're in the Dasha of the 7th Lord, so it's this part. And comparing how those things work. And we always get the relationship, if we're in one, or even when we're not in one, that is in alignment with both of those things, both in aggregate as the general nature of the person, in relationships, that general thing that you've always kind of done, which is just kind of your nature, which has been evolving and you're getting better at it, but it's still that general sort of thing that you do in a relationship with all people, and a particular moment in time based on dashas, transits, and all of the dynamic factors. So being able to understand and also mirror back to the person that the relationship they're in isn't a mistake, it's not wrong, it's you shouldn't have done this, you got to get out of this. It's always going to be where they're supposed to be. Right? Now, that doesn't mean that they have to stay in it forever, or, you know, all of these are other considerations. And in fact, as an astrologer, you should be able to see that and see why they were in that, what they've learned through it, even if it's been difficult and abusive and all like that, what the soul's purpose was, and what part of them, in aggregate and in general, and in that specific amount of time, brought them into contact with that other individual. That's what you really need to explain. This relationship has brought this thing into your life. It started at this time, went to this time. You should be able to see it. And you should be able to see the power and the beauty in it. And reflect that back to the person. And let them understand why this part of their soul has been developing. This is why it's been hard. This is what has been better. This is why, blah, blah, blah. And when an astrologer can't see that, they just get into simplistic black and white judgments. Oh, well, it's because of that Rahu in the 7th that you've made all these mistakes, and you do this, and this person, blah, blah, blah. And we get into all this. So, yeah, you need to be careful and not do that, and blah, blah, blah. And we get into all of the judgments and the simplistic kind of black and white sort of pathologizing, which is what happens so much in astrology. Again, it's not intentional. It's not like people don't know what they're doing. People know what they're doing. And it's okay when we say those things, because there's a lot of truth in that as well. Like, yeah, this is why this was painful, and, you know, it's just sort of, you know, you have to go through this mistake to learn this other thing or whatever. But to just understand it as an astrologer yourself, or someone getting a reading, that this is what the soul was here to do at that time. It's not a mistake, and to be able to reveal and unwind that part of the person's nature, and how the relationships have shown that thing, and that it's not a mistake, and it's not some horrible situation that's another person's fault. Again, that's the other thing that's really important here, is to reacquaint the person with what astrology is and what life is. It's their karma. It's their choices. No one can abuse you without your consent. No abusive relationship happened without your consent. At some point, something went off where you recognize, oh, I don't know, this is kind of weird. This person's a little strange. I'm not sure what's happening here. But let's just see what I don't know. Maybe it won't be like that, and we comply. And the first signs of abuse are often very small, and then we comply and we allow it. Again, I'm not forgiving abusers or abuse, but what I'm saying is that usually abuse is much more subtle, or especially in this day and age, every single person that's ever had a difficult relationship, it's they were emotionally abusive. Everything is emotionally abusive. Everybody's abusive all the time. Nobody wants to say that they're also abusive. Every human being is abusive at some point. All of us. I mean, I've heard some of the most abusive people talk about how abused they are by their partners. And I'm like, look, you could be pretty verbally abusive yourself. So just to get out of all of that triggering and pathologizing of things. And again, one of the things you learn how to do it well, you know, I'm being very direct and blunt here because I'm not reading someone's chart. I wouldn't say it like that in a reading, at least not at the beginning of the reading. By the time we get to the end, though, I would introduce people to the idea that, look, it's not just what was done to you. You're not a victim here. Especially if we've been in relationships for decades. People have been in relationships 15, 20 years. Oh, it was so abusive. They were so horrible. Look, you're not in a relationship that long with that kind of thing without your consent or your compliance. Again, I know there's extreme examples where people are kidnapped or all kinds of stuff, but we're talking about still trying to understand the true nature of what the soul is learning in relationships. And in most situations, what's really happening is we get sort of, you know, attached to some story that, again, is full of these projections and these illusions. And these stories about how, well, I would have just done anything, but they were so mean and abusive. It's like, okay, let's bring this back to something that's more reasonable, right? We get the relationship we need overall and at specific moments in life to teach us something, okay? And classic compatibility factors don't determine the success of a relationship. They show the potential. This is what I mean. You can have great relationship compatibility with another person where you line this chart up and their chart up and it looks great. And these people would have a great relationship. And it doesn't happen. And even when everything is there, waiting for it to happen, both people are ready. They both say they want a relationship. Here's a relationship with great compatibility factors, and it doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? Because if you were an astrologer, you would probably predict, oh yeah, this is going to be great. This will happen. You guys got such great compatibility, blah, blah. Why doesn't it happen? Well, it doesn't happen because the two people, when you look at their charts individually, do not have the karma or the tendency to have this good relationship. It sounds almost too simple, but it's very subtle. I don't know how many times I've seen where someone comes to me and they're like, I'm looking to have a relationship and there's these two people. And I'm thinking that I'll either go out with this one or that one. They both like me. And I will see one of them has much better compatibility with this person. But then I look at that person's chart and I see their tendencies, and I look at the chart of the other person, and I know that they're going to get in a relationship with the person who doesn't have the good compatibility factors because of their tendency. It would be much better if they got in a relationship with this other person, but that relationship is going to lack all of the drama and triggering and stuff that they are looking for in a relationship, that they are drawn toward in order to live their life the way their pattern is arranged. You want to understand, again, it's really important. Good synastry, or good compatibility, does not mean the person's going to do it. It does not mean it. And you can have one who does have the tendency and the other one doesn't, even though the compatibility factors are very good. And it might not be because they don't have the karma. It could be the timing. Again, these are the things you have to look at. I've seen this several times in my life where very good compatibility, and these are the things that you'll see where there's really good compatibility between two people. But then you look and you're like, oh yeah, but he's in this dasha, they're in that dasha. It ain't going to work. They're at this point in their path, they're in this other one. All of these things play into account. It's not just the charts, which the charts are the static factors. That's already set at birth. That's your pattern. But you have to read static factors with dynamic factors. Dynamic factors are transits and dashas primarily. And then again, you also have to look at that subtle dynamic that I'm already describing, which is the person's nature. Some people, I don't care how good the compatibility is with them, they're not going to have good relationships. Some people, no matter what, they're going to have a good relationship because of their nature. So these are also things that, again, it goes back to the beginning, but you want to just understand that good compatibility does not determine the success of a relationship. It shows the potential, and they would have the potential to have it, but that doesn't mean they're going to have it. Timing and their tendencies are going to will supersede those compatibility factors, and you hope to get those things to line up, right? This is why aren't there more, functional relationships? Why are there so many difficult ones? Because it takes a lot of things to line up. Sometimes you may have great compatibility with someone, but the dashas aren't lining up. The transits are going. They got Saturn Ketu going through their first house, or they're doing something, whatever it is. It's just not the time for them. Okay? So the last thing I have here is, even though clients want you to predict things such as should we break up or should we get divorced, it's better to just explain the relationship they have based on these factors I just mentioned and why they're in that relationship at that time. This is what astrology is always doing. Now again, clients will always say, well, what should I do? Should I break up? Should I do this? You should try to, this is my feeling, and again, you always wind up making a prediction, but the prediction is usually flows quite naturally after you explain the truth. The truth is the best prediction, which means you just explain what's happening. You don't need to get into, oh yeah, so you should divorce, or yeah, you should hang in there and go to marriage counseling. I mean, some people might want to do that. I don't think that's really the job of the astrologer. I think the job of the astrologer is to witness what's happening. Just voice it and explain it and empower the person. Because as soon as you say, oh yeah, I think you should now you're interfering for the most part. You're telling them, you're advising them to do something. Now again, somebody's getting beaten up or something. Again, I still don't say you should. I will reflect, however, something like what I just explained about abuse and all of that, and those kinds of statements will be obvious. By the time you read the chart correctly and just explain what the dynamic is that they have with each other, those kinds of, quote, predictions will be natural. Right? After, let's say it's something, severe and harsh where there's obviously not good factors, and I would talk about situations where it looks like they might have a tendency, perhaps, again, let's say the most extreme, to be abused or something like that. By the time you explain that and then the person tells you about the relationship, do you really need to say, and then they would ask you, and it happens, they'll ask me, so do you think I should leave the relationship? You don't have to answer. I don't have to say yes. You definitely should. You should definitely blah, blah, blah. I would usually, and almost 99% of the time, I would say, well, what do you think? And they come to they're like, yeah, like, okay. And so, by the time it even gets to that point in a situation like that, I'm already showing how now is a time for you in your life to be setting off on a new course. And I'll already be explaining those kinds of things to the person. Already be future pacing their life as not being part of something like that. That'll already be part of the discussion, so you don't even have to get into that. But again, even something less extreme. The other thing I would say is that astrologers being an advocate for a relationship staying together. Now again, this is somewhat controversial, but it's kind of this extension of the same principle. You want to be aware of the idea that your job as the astrologer is to help them fix their relationship. Again, like you have some goal to make this work or to make it not work. I think the goal is to explain what's happening so they understand it. This is my feeling about astrology anyway, and all this stuff, is we are a voice, a witness, an objective, partial witness to what's happening. I'm not cheering them on one way or the other. Yeah, do this and you can get it to work. I'm not cheering either way. I'm saying, here's what's happening. Here's the part of your energy that's awakening right now. This could be a challenge at this time here and there. This could be this is a time where there could be more communication around what's happening because of some of the disagreements, and that can lead to more cooperation. I'm not saying it's going to mean you're going to be together forever. I'm just saying this is a part of your life. And again, even back to the original theme, that relationships are a part of your life that is happening in relation to everything else, and this is how you can understand it and not be so triggered and unconscious and whatnot, because this is what we bring to relationships. So the relationships and more weekend, these are a lot of the things that I'm going to unravel in great detail, of course. And this is just the first part of the first day. Under that, here's the rest of the manual that I'm finishing right now. Moon and Sun in relationships, masculine, feminine capacities, 7 planets in relationships, lunar nodes and gender in relationships. This is very important. Exacerbating gender and sexuality. Difference between Rahu and Ketu, nodal connections through synastry. Relationship models, very important. Sometimes we're just in different models. This is how you can see often where these classical compatibility factors don't determine the success of a relationship. They show the potential, because maybe the people, based on where they are in their life, they're in a different relationship model at that time. Perhaps someone is running the dasha where they're in the fun and companionship model at that time, right? They want to, they're running like Mercury dasha, or Venus dasha, and they're in the fun companionship. Let's have fun and have companionship and enjoy life together. Maybe they're running a dasha where that's their model. Let's say the other person, no, they're in a dasha where it's a legacy model, which is let's get married and have kids, get serious and settle down. Or maybe they're running the dasha of the karma therapy model. Let's work on our crap together and blow each other up and counsel each other's inner child while we're all triggered and in turmoil all the time, or whatever. Again, some people have that, let's push each other's buttons and grow kind of energy, right? So again, these relationship models are really fascinating. So we're going to get into all of that kind of inner game. And this is stuff that I haven't taught before relative to the other relationship courses that I've taught, that are more based on techniques and how to do the readings, because all that's also pretty important. And to people that get this weekend course, they also will get as a bonus the entire 3D relationships course that I taught several years ago, video course. It's actually 12 hours long of me teaching absolute beginners how to do relationship astrology readings. It was actually one of the most amazing courses that I've ever done. It's not to brag, it's amazing to me when it comes out so well. And as powerful as it was, and as powerful as the techniques are, they're actually quite simple. So that's a bonus if someone wants to come to the Relationships and More weekend course. So anyway, just wanted to share this, and if you are interested in getting that course, then you can sign up for that.